The Shark Deck.
Hey man, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news from Yahoo. Bobcat Golthwait disowns his horrible talking horse comedy on its 35th anniversary. The anniversary just passed. That talking horse comedy called Hot to Trot. It's one of the few members of the infamous Rotten Tomatoes 0% Club. Hot to Trot, a 1988 American comedy film. Stars Bobcat Golthwait as simpleton bachelor Fred Cheney, who inherits a buck-toothed horse named Don and half of a stock brokerage firm from his dead mother, okay? He discovers Don is a talking horse who can also speak the language of several other animals. The horse, voiced by John Candy. Cheney returns Don to his talking horse family in the countryside and becomes a stockbroker, okay? Don the horse overhears a stock tip and calls Cheney, again, that's Bobcat Goldthwait's character, presumably using his teeth to dial the phone. Cheney acts on the investment advice and becomes wealthy overnight. Does the rest of the plot matter? No. So it's Mr. Ed meets stockbroking? Oh, hey. Back in 2018, Bobcat talked about the movie and said, "It was such a frustrating process and it put me in comedy jail. It was horrible. Honest to God, I wouldn't do this movie now because of how I feel about animals. That poor horse. It knew that if I was around, it'd have to do stuff that it normally wouldn't do. They were like, 'Come on, Don,' the horse. And Don is just clenching his mouth every time he sees me." Bobcat said there were also unexpected bathroom breaks. The horse's tail would go up before he had to take a dump. There was a horse wrangler named Corky who would catch it with a shovel and it would never hit the floor. We were doing this serious scene and I saw the tail go up. I look at Corky and he's sitting on an apple box and doesn't move. The horse had diarrhea and it just blasted the wall. It blasted me. Everything from the neck down. The first assistant director was like, that's a wrap for today. Not even like, let's clean the wall and move to the other set. The film was shut down because the horse had diarrhea. Bobcat says, "Don't blame the horse. Let's not throw the horse under the bus. You can blame me and the director. Leave the poor animal out of it." Vulture spoke to former Mets first baseman Keith Hernandez about the big question: do people want to talk to you more about Game 6 or Seinfeld? Keith said, Seinfeld. Vulture asked him, "So you get a call, Seinfeld wants you for an episode. What was your reaction?" Keith said, "I didn't know anything about the Seinfeld show. We played night games. We didn't watch primetime. I also never watched primetime my first year of retirement, so I never heard of Seinfeld. When Jerry conceived the show, he was a fan of mine and a fan of the Mets. He could have gotten a hold of me through the Mets, but he reached out to my former baseball agent who called me and told me about the show. He called me earlier in the week on Wednesday, and they wanted me to fly to LA and be there on Monday the following week. It was very rushed. When I agreed to it, they FedExed the script to me overnight, and I received it on Friday. I thought it was going to be a little cameo. Then I realized I was a very prominent figure in the episode. I was actually the guest star. I'd never acted, never any desire to act. But it seemed like a cool experience, good opportunity, so I agreed to it, and I arrived on LA on Saturday night. I had a Sunday to relax, and then it was a 7 a.m. call to the studio on Monday morning. Keith, did you have any questions before you agreed to it? How much money were they going to pay me? I asked my agent how much, and he said, well, they're going to fly to L.A. and put you at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills and provide you with very nice transportation. You'll be there for a week, and they'll pay you $15,000. And Keith said, oh, okay, I'll do it. Keith Hernandez says, Larry David was very friendly and welcoming. Jerry was a little sheepish but welcoming. Julia Louis-Dreyfus was about 3 months pregnant with her first child, I believe. She probably wasn't feeling that great, but she was wonderful to work with. Jason Alexander was a little standoffish most of the week. Michael Richards was very inquisitive about baseball. He knew nothing about it and questioned me throughout the week. He was very interested in the lifestyle and what my profession contained. It was wonderful. He was very sweet, a nice man. So they followed up about the Jason Alexander thing. Keith Hernandez said he probably had to work his way through bit roles, and here I come as a guest star, and who am I, a retired baseball player? I'm just speculating. But it all changed when we had to do the complete run-through in chronological order in front of the NBC executives on Friday night. I had to pass their litmus test and censors, and I didn't make any mistakes. Jason came up to me with a big smile and shook my hand and said, nice going. From that point on, he was wonderful. I guess I had to prove myself. I realized I couldn't hold him up and be terrible and not memorize lines. I had a lot of lines. It was a very, very stressful week. The first scene in the locker room was the most difficult for me because they kept altering lines until the last minute. I memorized not only my lines in every scene, but I also knew Jerry and Jason's lines. I wanted to learn the cadence of how they spoke, so when they switched the lines, I was stressed out. After I did everything perfectly in front of the NBC suits, I went out in the first scene in front of the live audience and I screwed up and it was like, cut. All right, Keith, let's do it again. I'm like, oh gosh, you got to be kidding me. I went back behind the set, took a deep breath, tried to calm down, and I didn't make a mistake after that. Larry came up to me and said, it's important we get this right. We think we've got a really funny episode. We don't want to use laugh tracks if we can't finish this today. We want real laughter. Keith said, I survived it. I really couldn't appreciate what was going on until I watched it when the episode aired. Little more here. A few episodes later in The Boyfriend, there's a baseball etiquette disagreement. Elaine wears an opposing team's hat while in the owner's box of the Yankees game. They ask Keith, do you do that? Keith said, if a certain organization invites you to a game and you're a fan of the opposing team or another team, you don't wear the hat. You do not. You don't have to wear a Yankees hat or a hat of whatever team invited you. But the protocol is if you've been invited, you're a guest, and you don't do that. Comedian Colin Moulton wanted to check out his heritage. He said, I just got back from Moulton, England. I was searching for some good people in my family tree, and I came up with Bupkis. Moulton discovered he's a direct descendant of Thomas Moulton, an admiral and a judge during the reigns of King John and King Henry III, who took part in a number of wars with Scotland. However, his ancestor was not beloved. The current Moulton said Thomas Moulton was reviled by the townspeople. They dismantled a chapel he built. The townspeople hated him. He was a scoundrel. But I think I learned there's a little scoundrel in all of us. I was just trying to find one good person in my ancestry, and I couldn't do it. This all started with my dad. I didn't want to be like him since he was troubled in so many ways. Apparently, the current Moulton took after his grandfather, who was a vaudeville comic in the 1920s. These days, the current Moulton lives in Georgia and says, I can be a comic and live in Georgia. I love my life. I have a half-acre chicken farm. I surf. I'm living the life. He surfs in Georgia? I guess. You don't hear much about the Georgia beaches. Yeah, I guess. I'm going to get letters from Georgia now. I'm leaving it in. I'd love to hear from you. Facebook group, Daily Comedy News. If you're in Georgia and you're like, come on, man, big surfing crowd, hit me up. I can take it. The New York Times profiled Judy Gold and asked her how she spends her Sundays. Some of the things Judy Gold does is I put on my tennis clothes and I go outside to get the Times. Interesting that she mentioned the Times in a Times article. I see what you did there because they don't put it on my doorstep. I stretch on the floor for 5 minutes and then make a shake with almond milk, whey protein, berries, bananas, powdered peanut butter, kale, and chia seeds. Then I put my tennis bag together and pack 2 bottles of water, one with ice, the other with watermelon-flavored liquid IV. At 11 a.m., we leave for tennis. It's only 2 miles, but in the summer, it can take 15 minutes because everybody's driving 5 miles an hour on Bradford Street, which makes me crazy. We love the Provincetown Tennis Club. It's something out of a waspy New England Jane Austen novel. It's very social and friendly. I love doubles. It's like a chess game filled with strategy. Sometimes we see Billie Jean King or Delia Ephron. I have a Wilson racket, which we spin to see who goes first by calling wine or margarita. We play for 90 minutes, then we sweep the courts, drive back home, and scream at how slow everybody is. Then she talked about going to the beach for the afternoon. At night, back home, it's work mode. It's hard to communicate with me because I'm focused on what I'm doing that night on stage. There's a palpable shift. I sit with my notebook at the kitchen table and go through jokes, usually new ones I've written during the week and want to include. Then I shower, dress, get my face on, and get my bag ready. I ride my red Trek bike and enjoy the 10 minutes of solitary time to get in the right head. I sit at the bar and get water. I don't drink before a set because I want every synapse of my brain working. If I have a new bit, I can't wait to get to it. The show is about what annoys me, like cancel culture, anti-Semitism, stupidity, and turning 60. After a show, we bike home on Commercial Street, 2 old lesbians with their bells going off because everybody's in the middle of the street. At home, we watch TV. We just watched the Mary Tyler Moore documentary, which I loved, and Netflix's El Dorado, Everything the Nazis Hate. Sounds fun. That's your comedy news for today. Follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your shows. See you tomorrow.